Katie, and our topic is animal testing, and Brooke and I focus more on the cosmetic side of it, and Lauren and Michaela focus more on the medical side of it. So, we have questions?
Usually I save this question for the end, but I'm going to start right off with it. How do you guys personally feel about animal testing? I want to hear each of your opinions.
Personally, for me, I do not approve of animal testing, especially on the cosmetic side of things. I understand where maybe medically they feel like it is more necessary, that the benefits are more substantial, but cosmetically I think there are enough ways to avoid it.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. There are some instances, I think, like in the medical field, that it is important to have some sort of testing on animals because they may be using some kind of chemical or something that could be very dangerous to humans. But cosmetic-wise, there are really pretty simple ways to avoid it. And so
Okay.
I don't.
Going into this, I was kind of neutral. I didn't like have an opinion because I didn't really know much about it. But now that I've researched it and stuff, I would say that I'm against animal testing because I've seen all the cruelty, and it's not right ethically in my opinion, and it's not right practically either because it hasn't been proven that there are other alternatives to it. So it hasn't been proven that that's the only way to do things. So I say I'm against it.
And I'm kind of the same as her. I was neutral going into it, but I found out that I'm against it because I saw like a video also that just like it was like seemed like torture instead of being tested.
Okay, so no. Somebody said medical okay, but cosmetics not?
That's that.
Okay. All right. So who's medical and who's cosmetic? Did we say? I'm sorry.
We are cosmetic.
Cosmetic and medical. Okay. All right, just making sure. Sorry. I'm late to the game here.
So Michaela, what was it that changed your mind?
Well, I think with Lauren, it was the video, to be honest. Well, it was the whole research, but like when I saw it in action in a video, like
And
actually.
explain to us what you saw. We haven't seen the video.
Okay, there was this video. It was called like animal testing in 60 seconds, and it just showed a bunch of what they did to them in the laboratories, and they are testing on them, but they're also being cruel. We saw they were like knocking them with things, putting them in tubes, like, and I saw a dog, they picked it up by like its like neck. It just wasn't being treated right. And I'm sure not all animal testing laboratories that happens at, but majority of them it does.
Michaela, who produced that video? Who was the source for that?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think it was PETA.
PETA?
Yeah, PETA. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh, okay, yeah,
Okay.
PETA.
So that one video changed a lot of your perspective on things.
Yes, and it's like all the research in general.
Okay. So I was going to ask if you considered the source, because certainly if you ask somebody who's in an argument, maybe you and Lauren are in an argument, if I ask you, I'm going to get your side. If I ask Lauren, I'm going to get her side. I may be swayed depending on which side I get, but if I only get half of the story. So was there anything that you saw maybe on the other side that said, hey, there's a lot of benefits here that may have convinced you the other way, had you?
Yes, there's a lot of benefits in the medical field specifically, like not the cosmetics, but penicillin, blood transfusions, tuberculosis medicine, meningitis vaccines, kidney transplants, breast cancer, asthma inhalers, polio vaccines, insulin for diabetes, and implants for Parkinson's disease. All of those things came from animal testing, but I think there were alternatives that they could have maybe been able to found the same results.
So all those good things, but the ends don't justify the means, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the same. I feel the same way.
Okay. Brooke, if you had Parkinson's and there wasn't a cure, but you knew if they had tested on animals, maybe you could have had a cure, or maybe a family member of yours has Parkinson's, how would you feel about that? Would you say, yeah, I'm still against it, or maybe in this particular case it was okay?
I probably would have said it was okay because, I mean, to me, like, animals are valuable to me, but that was my family member that perhaps died because they had Parkinson's.
Hit a little closer to home then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Katie, what are some of the things that you ran across that made you say, this is not a good idea?
I really think, especially in the circumstances of cosmetic, that there are just many easy ways to avoid it. Cosmetic industry really just uses animal testing for new chemicals because it might be cheaper for them to manufacture, but there are plenty of chemicals that have already been tested that are open for use, or there are many ingredients in cosmetics that actually don't need to be tested on animals at all because they're safe materials. So I think cosmetically there just seems to be no real reason to do it because there are so many easy alternatives.
So tell us, what are they doing?
What are they doing to the
Yeah.
animals? There are a lot, most of it is eye and skin tests. There's something called a Dray's test where they will drop a certain chemical into the animal's eyes and then have to keep the eyelids open for 72 hours. So that's 3 days. That's a really long time, and it just seems very unnecessary to do that for one chemical that could be avoided.
Why are they keeping it open for 72 hours?
To see how it affects, because when you like close your eye, like it can like wash the chemical
Oh,
away,
okay.
and like so they keep it
Prolonged
open.
contact then?
Yeah,
Okay.
to keep prolonged contact.
So what are the alternatives to using the animals for testing in cosmetics?
In cosmetics, well, the alternatives are generally just to not use the chemicals that the FDA requires to be tested. But many companies do that and are still very successful, and so it's very reasonable to do that.
There's just some examples of companies that do use ingredients that the FDA doesn't require to be tested. Or like Bath and Body does that. Elf is a big makeup company. I think they sell it at Target mainly. That doesn't use animal testing. I think they're actually vegan, so they don't use any animal product or anything that would come from animals. Those are just a couple examples that, and they're well-known names. Like you sure know them, so it's not that they're not doing as well without animal testing.
So what's the logic behind animal testing? If the option is to just not use the, like, what is it about the ingredient that the FDA says you have to use an animal?
I think it would just be the safety of humans, because there have been some drugs, like there was a sleeping pill, I don't know how to pronounce it, but that in the 1950s they released that drug, and on animals it didn't have a negative effect at all, but it caused birth deformities in newborn babies. So that was just, I think that's more of the medical side, but it can be dangerous.
So if they test it on an animal, are there more instances of if it harms an animal, it's going to harm a human? Or are there times where it cures the animal, but it hurts the human? Or like, are there inconsistencies there?
Yeah, there are a lot of inconsistencies with that. That's why a lot of us don't agree with animal testing, because it really also hasn't always proven to be effective. Like they'll pass animal testing and then they'll try it on humans and it will cause a lot of problems. And there are instances where it'll hurt the animal, but it can actually help humans. So there are a lot of inconsistencies.
What kind of animals are we talking about here, ladies? Give me some examples of what we're testing on.
A lot of them are like rats, mice, reptiles, like the rodents, like anything like that.
Anything else?
And then, they test on like dogs and primates, but it's 90%, I think, are the rats.
Okay, so rats, rodents in general. We talked about dogs. We talked about primates, apes, monkeys, that kind of thing. Anything else? No.
Rabbits.
Rabbits. Okay. So, do we see a distinction if I'm testing on a rat, which is clearly a rodent and probably something set for extermination anywhere outside of the lab, anywho, versus if I'm bringing in a chimpanzee to test on it, or I'm bringing in a golden retriever or something like that? Do we have a problem? I mean, is this one okay? Because it's really a rodent, and they sell traps in the store to catch those kinds of things. Not so much traps for golden retrievers or chimpanzees, but is this one more okay with you ladies versus this one? Where do we land on that?
I think I view all animals should be equal, but in the Animal Welfare Act, the rats and mice and rodents, they're excluded from the Animal Welfare Act, so they're thought of lesser, but I would say that they're all equal, that you should treat them the same.
Which
No, you're good.
Which animals are most like humans in that respect? Like, which ones do they turn to?
I would probably say most people would turn to monkeys, probably, or primates.
Is there any other, so we do some testing on like chimpanzees. Is there any other country in the world that does testing on chimpanzees?
Yeah, China does.
I know for sure that does, because they actually require animal testing on all of their products.
I'm sorry, who does?
So, China.
China does, okay.
Yeah. And They don't require it. They require it. So like if the U.S. was to ship some sort of product to China, it would have to have undergone animal testing. But they don't require it for in-country products, but a majority of their in-country products do use it just because it's to them an easy alternative to go.
It's going to be a lot of testing because most of their stuff is coming here, not the other
Yeah.
way around, right?
Yeah.
So we think that's probably fairly prevalent then over there versus here. Do we do a lot of animal testing here in the United States, ladies?
Yeah.
Yeah, about 25 million animals are used every year in the United States for any sort of research or testing. So it's pretty prevalent here.
How many of those end up being destroyed? You have any idea?
Probably a large majority, because after testing, most animals aren't fit to be either released back to the wild or sent to a home or something like. So if it was a dog, they wouldn't be sent to your house or something because they're just not fit for.
Most of the time, they end up euthanizing them at the end of it because they're not fit to go back to live in an environment or shelter or anything like
Well,
that.
let's ask you about that then. Okay, what if there's a dog in a shelter that's set to be euthanized anyway? And they take it and they say, well, it's going to be euthanized anyway, we'll take it, we'll test. And I mean, the end result is the same. Is that not, I mean, the dog's going to get put down one way or the other. Isn't that okay?
That happens. Yeah, that
They have,
happens.
it's called pound seizure.
Okay.
And they go to like an animal shelter and they take the ones that are older or the ones that might already going to be euthanized anyway, and they would use that for animal testing.
Okay.
But a lot of people still have problems with that because
Are you,
still have
are you
rights.
ladies a lot of people? Do you still have problems? I mean, the dog's going to die anyway. In fact, we're kind of extending its life, right? Because we're going to take it somewhere else, and I don't know if it's quality of life, but it's life nonetheless. I mean, how do we feel about that?
I think it's not very good, especially because it's ineffective because most animals in shelters are mixed breed and
Okay.
they don't know their background, where they've been. So a lot of times the tests will also be inconclusive because you don't really know what kind of dog you're testing on.
But is the idea just to test on a dog, or does it have to be a certain kind of dog?
Well, the idea is to test on a dog, but you want to know maybe like genetic qualities or
Okay.
the background, their history, because depending on what you're testing on
Genetic
them.
quality is by breed, then. You want to know
Yes,
kind of
by
what breed. Okay.
Yeah, you want to know maybe because one chemical could affect one kind of dog differently than it could another one. So you don't want to generalize and say, oh, all dogs react badly to this because maybe a different kind would.
I like where you're going there. Let's chase that down just a little bit further. Can anybody tell me why it's important to know what breed of dog that is if you're testing? We'll go with cosmetics. We're testing certain cosmetics. Why would it be important to know what particular breed that dog is in our tests?
Well, some breeds have different genetic backgrounds and medical histories
Okay.
that might be common with that specific breed. And
I'm thinking
it's
more
hard to get
traits.
accurate results.
I'm talking more traits. So if I'm Pantene and I'm testing shampoo or conditioner, why is it important for me to know what breed of dog we're testing on? And not a mutt. It could be any breed or many breeds.
Well, I mean, Pantene, their shampoo for a majority, so it'd be the type of hair that
There you
that
go.
dog has.
Very important for me to know what the qualities, what the genetics of that type of hair in that dog. Is it, is it a coarse hair? Is it, it would be important for me to know that breed so that I know that hair type on that dog, or that fur type in this case, so that when my testing can be consistent. Yes.
Are there states here in the United States that have prohibited pound seizure? And if so, which ones?
I didn't come across that in any of my research.
So is it fair to say that most of these animals are bred in the lab?
The majority are because then they know their genetic background because they've bred them themselves.
Not, I don't think it's normally in the lab, but they have breeders outside that they go and they buy from specifically for that purpose.
It's a fantastic question. So if we're breeding, we'll say rats. Let's leave dogs and chimpanzees and all that alone. Let's say rats. What if we're breeding rats in the lab? And before I came to work here, I worked at the University of Kentucky in their medical center, and there is animal testing that goes on there. In fact, there's a good amount of it, and they breed rats just to test. Is that okay? I mean, I'm not going to the pound and getting a golden retriever to test on, but I'm purposely breeding the rat. It's kind of, isn't it just like breeding crickets to feed to snakes or to feed to other animals? If I'm breeding the rat to do the testing, isn't that okay? I mean, I'm kind of making my own supply at that point, right?
I think it depends on your view of animals' rights. It goes back to that.
Okay, based on your view of animal rights, isn't that okay?
Not based on my view. I think that's ethically wrong because I view animals' rights maybe not the same as humans, but still, you should respect them and not like harm them in any way. And it says in the Bible, because I hold like a biblical view, it says in Proverbs 12:10, a righteous man regardeth the life of his beast. And I think when God is saying that, he's saying that we should respect all of the animals' rights.
Doesn't he give us domain over animals?
He does,
Okay.
but I don't believe that that means to harm them in any way.
Okay,
That
that's fair
just
enough.
means that, yeah, we have.
Are you all vegetarians?
I am, actually.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Okay. So part of this testing, I mean, you're giving, I'm not trying to pick on you, but you're also saying these animals have rights. But part of the testing, I've been to UK, and they brought it up. I've been to UK, and they have a research farm in which literally you can reach into the stomach of a cow, because part of what, part of what they do is they watch and see how this, how it's going to affect beef production and things like that. They do that to keep us safe. This is food that you eat. Is that a conflict?
I think that if there are alternatives, especially with like, I don't know a lot of them for cosmetic, but for medical, some of the alternatives that they could do other than testing on the animal specifically is study of human populations, clinical research, test tube research, computer-based techniques, human cell and tissue cultures, stem cell and genetic testing methods, and of course you can always test it on a human too. I know that doesn't work like for everything, but sometimes that could work. So I think there are alternatives.
Mr. Matthews made a very good point about the food supply. We're breeding chickens so that we can kill them, so that we can eat them, and they're very tasty, by the way. Why is that any different than breeding rats for medical experiments? Again, at the end of the day, there's benefit there. In the chicken's case, they're yummy. And in the rat's case, we've cured Parkinson's, or we've cured, whatever the case. We may find a cure for Parkinson's or cancer or whatever else. Where do we draw the line, ladies? Is it okay if it's food, but it's not okay if it's research? And I'm asking you personally.
Well, I'm a vegetarian, so
Oh, God.
I know.
Okay.
So I think honestly that.
So no to
either
the
way-
chickens, but you said medical was okay, so the rats are okay.
Yes. Well,
Okay.
that's what I think, because for me, I can very easily go without eating meat. I will survive. It's not going to threaten my life. Whereas with medical, maybe
Mhm.
this will save lives. So that's the way I look at it.
Ms. Scott?
I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of conflict there, I guess, for me. I hadn't really thought about that
Mhm.
until here. But,
It's my job, I'm sorry. Okay.
I don't know. I haven't really thought about that.
That's
So
a
be thinking
fair
about
answer.
that.
Michaela, what do you think?
I think it has more, from my view, it has to do more with how they're treating the animal while they're there. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with like animal testing if they weren't like treating it harmfully or inflicting any harm in any way, but a lot of the times they do. So I think that's the wrong part of
You're
it.
confident in a lot of times they do mistreat the animals?
Yeah.
Or according to the PETA video that you saw? they
According
mistreat
to
them?
all my research.
Fantastic point. Lauren, what do you think?
I'm similar to what Michaela said. Like,
Mhm.
if they're being treated well, like, I feel like when you're animal testing, you're like, it was almost like torturing them before they died. It's not like a peaceful death.
Okay.
Although I'm not sure if it's like that when they kill them for food, but.
Okay, so you mentioned before the AMA, the Animal Welfare Act, and that put stipulations on some animals that were okay and some that were, didn't matter really. What have they come up with since the AMA? Has there been anything more recent that would protect their rights and how you treat them?
Not that we had found, but the AWA, it only like sets regulations on the size of the cages, how they're handled and that stuff, but not the actual testing. So,
cosmetically, there has been, it's called the Humane Cosmetics Act. It was introduced in the House of Representatives last year to ban the use of animals in cosmetics. It hasn't been passed or anything yet, but that is something that